Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some pretty wild political stuff today.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
We've got accusations, firings, even a story about the Lincoln bedroom, the works.
Definitely not your average day in Washington.
So first up, this journalist, Nick Sorter, he's making some serious claims about Congresswomen Maxine Waters and Elizabeth Warren.
Assault allegations? That's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, he's saying they physically assaulted him, like pushing and punching.
Wow, that's not something you hear every day, especially about sitting members of Congress.
And get this, he's even considering going to the D.C. district attorney to file charges.
Now that's where things get really interesting because, well, the D.C. district attorney was appointed by President Trump.
So you're thinking potential for bias?
It definitely adds another layer to the whole thing. Could get messy.
For sure. Okay, so we've got this potential political drama brewing, but then completely out of left field, news breaks about the chief financial officer of FEMA getting fired, Mary Comins.
Big position. FEMA manages billions of dollars in disaster relief.
Exactly. And she was fired for allegedly misusing funds, specifically for putting migrants up in luxury hotels in New York City.
Luxury hotels. With FEMA money. That's definitely going to raise some eyebrows.
Especially since it seems to clash with President Trump's policies on immigration, right?
Oh, absolutely. Huge clash. And to make it even more pointed, they're using terms like deep state activists when talking about her firing.
So they're basically saying she was working against the president's agenda.
Seems like it. Painting a target on her back, for sure.
So we've got alleged assault, a high-profile firing, and then, just to throw you for a loop, we have President Trump inviting someone named Mark Fogel to spend the night in the Lincoln bedroom.
The Lincoln bedroom. Wow, that's a pretty big deal. Usually reserved for, dignitaries and stuff.
Right. So who is this Mark Fogel and why the special treatment?
Well, he's an American who was recently released after being detained overseas. Turns out President Trump was involved in getting him back.
Ah, so it's kind of a welcome home gesture then.
Exactly. And there's a human element, too. Apparently, Fogel's 95-year-old mother had made a plea to the president to help free her son.
Wow. Okay, so it's a political move with a personal touch. We're seeing a lot of layers to these stories, aren't we?
Yeah, and it just shows that sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem on the surface. You got to dig a little deeper.
Okay, so back to Nick Sorter and those assault allegations. He actually gave an interview on a show called The Benny Show.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Didn't he go into a lot more detail about the incident?
He did. And he even compared his experience to how Republican members of Congress are often treated by reporters.
Interesting. What was his point there?
He's claiming that these reporters, some allegedly funded by USAID, constantly harass Republicans, chasing them down, ambushing them for quotes, basically saying it's a double standard.
So he's painting himself as the victim of the same kind of aggressive tactics that Republicans supposedly face all the time.
Exactly. Whether you believe him or not, it does raise questions about the role of the press and how far is too far when trying to get a story.
It's a tricky line to walk, that's for sure. Freedom of the press versus the right to not be harassed.
Right. And then there's this clip Sorter played in the interview. He was trying to ask Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley about FEMA funding for migrants in NYC, the whole Mary Comins thing.
Oh, I remember that. What happened? Did she refuse to comment?
She did, but it's the way he described her reaction that stood out. He said she gave him this ghetto death stare.
Wow, that's pretty harsh.
It is, and I think he's using that to make these Democratic congresspeople look arrogant and untouchable, like they don't have to answer to anyone.
It definitely feeds into that narrative of versus them that's become so prevalent in politics these days.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, where does all this animosity lead? Is there even any common ground left?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves, I think.
Well, that was a lot. We just skimmed the surface of these stories.
Yeah, and we've got a lot more to discuss. It really is. These things, they always seem to spiral out, don't they?
So back to Nick Sorter. He's talking about contacting the D.C. district attorney about those assault allegations. But realistically, can anything actually happen?
I mean, assault's tough to prove, especially when it's one person's word against another's.
And these are congresswomen. Powerful people.
Exactly. They've got lawyers, connections. The whole system's kind of built to protect them, you know?
So even if he goes to the DA, it's not like automatic charges, let alone a trial.
Right. And even if it goes to trial, who knows how to play out? Remember, innocent until proven guilty.
So maybe he's more focused on public opinion than a legal win?
Could be. Sometimes just getting the story out there, shining a light on it, that's enough to make a difference.
Like public pressure kind of forces some action.
Right. And who knows, maybe others with similar experiences will come forward.
The Mary Comins situation, too, that sparks a whole different conversation.
Oh, yeah, FEMA and how it operates, how they spend all that money.
Billions of dollars. And she wasn't some random appointee. She was a career official.
Worked her way up, so for her to get fired, something major must have gone down.
Probably that clash with the president's immigration policies. using FEMA funds for hotels for migrants,
Direct contradiction, yeah. And they went right for the jugular with that deep state talk.
trying to make her look like the enemy, the one undermining everything.
Classic political move. Find a scapegoat, deflect the blame.
So we've got these allegations against the Congresswomen, a high-level firing, then that Lincoln bedroom invite. Crazy how it all connects, right?
What do you see as the thread running through it all?
Power, who has it, how they use it, who's trying to grab it, sort of claiming the Congresswoman silenced him. Cohen's maybe getting pushed out for going against the president's agenda.
Even that Lincoln bedroom invite. It's a gesture of power in a way.
It's like a constant tug-of-war behind the scenes, and it's not just about politics. It affects people's lives, their jobs, their sense of security.
Exactly. You can't separate those things.
And then there's the media's role in all this, sort of going on the Denny show instead of like CNN or something.
That's interesting. Bypassing the mainstream outlets.
Yeah, using a different platform to get his story out.
More and more people are doing that these days. Social media, independent outlets. It's changing how we get information.
And how we see the world. It's harder to know what's real sometimes.
But it also means more people have a voice, can challenge the official narrative.
Like a double-edged sword.
Definitely. We have to be more careful, more critical of what we read and hear.
Like being our own detectives almost.
Exactly. And the better we are at that, the better we'll understand all this political stuff.
All right, so we've talked about sword war, the Congresswomen, Coleman's, FEMA, power struggles, media changes. Woo!
It's a lot, but it shows how connected these seemingly separate things really are.
Like a snapshot of what's happening in the country right now.
And understanding it all is crucial if we want to be informed citizens.
So what do we do with all this info? Where do we go from here?
Good question. There's no easy answer, but staying informed, engaged, being curious, those are good places to start.
And this stuff's always in motion. Today's crisis is tomorrow's forgotten headline. But those underlying issues, those stick around.
Power struggles, battles for influence, that'll always be there in some form.
It's up to us to figure out how to deal with it. How about our voices heard?
Exactly. What kind of future do we want? That's the question we all have to answer.
Well, all that was pretty intense, I gotta say.
Yeah, a lot to process for sure.
But before we wrap up, one more thing. Sorter said something in that interview that really stuck with me.
What was that?
He said those congresswomen, he called them Democrats, they act like they're untouchable, like above the law, don't have to answer to anyone.
And that resonated with you.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people feel that way about politicians these days. Doesn't matter what party. Like they're disconnected from us regular folks.
At a touch. And when people feel like their leaders aren't accountable, that breeds distrust.
And anger, and it makes people feel ignored.
Which can lead to all sorts of problems. Protests, even violence.
So how do we fix this? How do we make those in power actually accountable?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think we got to demand more transparency, higher standards, make it clear we won't tolerate corruption or abuse.
And be willing to talk to people who see things differently.
Absolutely. Get out of our echo chambers, have real conversations even when they're tough.
Like relearning how to disagree without, going crazy.
Exactly. Because we are all in this together, right? Different opinions, different backgrounds, but we all share this country.
And we all want it to succeed. All right, so what did we learn today?
Politics is complicated. Lots of layers, hidden agendas, power games. We got to understand all that to make sense of it all.
And the media is changing, giving people more power to speak up.
And it's on us to have those tough conversations, try to find solutions together.
Well, I think that about covers it for this deep dive. Hopefully it gave you some things to think about.
Do your own research, be critical of what you read, form your own opinions.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, it's easy to feel that way sometimes. Like they're up there in their ivory tower and we're down here dealing with real life.
Exactly. But hey, let's end on a positive note. Remember that story with Mark Foble, the American detained overseas?
Yeah, the one who got invited to the Lincoln bedroom.
Right. President Trump helped get him released. That, to me, shows a different side of power.
Interesting point. We've been focusing on how power can be misused, abused.
But it can be a force for good, too, right?
Absolutely. In this case, it was used to help someone in need. Pretty powerful gesture.
It shows that even with all the political drama, there's still room for, compassion. Leaders using their power to make a real difference in someone's life.
Yeah, good reminder that power is a tool. It can be used to build up or tear down.
And ultimately, it's up to us, the people, to hold those in power accountable. Make sure they're using it the right way.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We covered a lot, but hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming.
Politics can be confusing, but it doesn't have to be a total mystery.
It's about people, events, choices that affect us all. Even if you're not a politics fanatic, it's important to stay informed,
Absolutely. Engage in these conversations. Make your
Yeah.
voice heard. The future depends on us all participating.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even a little bit entertaining.
Always keep exploring these issues, do your research, form your own opinions.
The political landscape is constantly changing, so stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay hopeful.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time.